Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, May 12th, 2026, and today we're going to talk about how food prices are bananas, but could growing your own bananas help? Or at least veggies. We're going to take a question about starting a flower farm, and finally, we'll do a little Earthway seeder breakdown, so let's do it. All right, everyone, welcome to Tilth Tuesday, your weekly reminder that you can get living soil compost and potting mixes from the bonafide nerds at Tilth Soil. Check out Nathan on the Composter Podcast, Season 4, Episode 3, or head to tilthsoil.com to learn more. I hope your weeks have started out the way you had hoped. For us, it's a big week with a big order for a big lunch for one of our clients, so that's fun. That's always a nice little treat in the early spring. The tomatoes and peppers finally went in yesterday, which is definitely a bit late for us. I've planted them in late April before, like out in the field, but this year I just wasn't feeling the weather. And weirdly, my instincts were right. We got a later than normal and relatively hard frost here on May 2nd or 3rd. Obviously, I could have covered them and protected them that way, and they would have been fine probably, but I was happy to have waited and not had to cover stuff because covering stuff is not fun. And then, of course, when you get, 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts, then covering stuff becomes recovering stuff. Gonna do a side-by-side with about half the peppers are going into burlap as a burlap mulch, and then the other half don't have any burlap. I'm gonna actually interplant on the sides of those. I don't love growing on any sort of ground covers like that because it hogs the bed for things like interplanting, but also any sort of side dressing, like I have to take it up, then do the side dressing, and then put it back. I love that. But I figured it was worth getting some experience with using the burlap in some different ways. Anyway, what are you all up to right now? Let us know, or better yet, send in your 20-second farm video clips to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. Just upload it to Dropbox or Drive and then share it with Mike. Oh, and don't forget that I will be going live for an hour tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern here on YouTube. So make sure to set your reminders and bring your questions. Awesome. All right. So the other day I was looking at our food budget over the last few years, and a question sort of popped into my head. Can someone meaningfully reduce their grocery bills by growing their own food? I will return to my own budget in a minute, but a lot of times the catalyst for getting into the famously difficult profession of farming or hobby of gardening isn't just a desire to be outdoors and get dirty more, though for some, I'm certain it is. It's usually about health or knowing where their food comes from, or a love of good food in general, or potentially for some, it will be about reducing their grocery bills. This is especially true now, I would imagine, with groceries going up some 30% or more over the last few years, significantly higher than normal food price inflation, with the war threatening to take that up even higher. And when prices go up, they don't really come back down again very much, I think, as we've learned. Corporations get a taste of good profits, and it's hard to wrestle that back out of their hands. Back to the question, though, of if someone could save money growing their own gardens, and I think the answer is a resounding maybe, but probably not, or at least not for a while, especially if you don't currently have a garden. The reason is that although veggies have gone up in price, it's beef, coffee, and eggs that are the biggest jumpers. If those are things that you buy a lot of, you are spending more and more money on those things right now. But obviously, a garden won't help with any of those things, at least not specifically. However, veggies are up too and going up. And so in a situation where you are a vegetarian or vegan and eat a lot of veggies, the calculus will be different for you. Spending maybe like a few $100s to start a handful of, really nice raised beds could actually yield some savings over the course of a couple years if you're a big veggie eater. It won't be a big savings, but it will be there. Or if you eat meat and eggs and all the things, but you also do eat a lot of veggies, there could be a savings there. Prices in crops like wheat have also fluctuated quite a bit these last few years, but ultimately trickled higher and higher. Unfortunately, grains are not crops that are fruitful to produce on a small scale so much. They really require efficient equipment for planting and harvesting and cleaning and all the things. Some staples like potatoes can be produced decently on a small scale for a small family, but again, the cost of starting new gardens can be, depending on your situation and how you go about it, can be pricey, making the space valuable. So you wouldn't want to spend that money on a cheaper crop unless you eat oodles of that particular crop. Buying them in bulk would probably be easier. And then the expensive, garden space can be used for expensive products like lettuce, heirloom tomatoes, and that sort of stuff that you truly could be saving money on so long as the gardening goes well for you. Now, the same thing could be said of chicken flocks. There is no guarantee you won't end up spending as much, if not more, per dozen, at least for the first few years, when you factor in the coop, the cost of the birds, the cost of the feed, the loss to illness and predation, the fencing, the labor, and obviously cattle and pigs, etc., are a whole other conversation, though someone could get into raising pigs for significantly cheaper than raising cattle. But livestock are obviously expensive. That's not to discourage you. There are lots of reasons to have a garden, raise chickens or whatever, that are hard to account for financially. It's fun, it's enjoyable, it's good for your health, it's nice to be outside, it's fun to be in the dirt. I like bugs. Those are things. But that is to encourage you to investigate what you're actually spending substantial money on groceries wise now. That will give you an idea of where your expenses have gone up or where they are the most expensive. Then at very least, whatever you decide to do, lay out a project budget and figure out, if it's even, vaguely feasible to save money doing this, like growing your own food or raising your own livestock, etc. However, the reason I've been thinking about this, like I said at the top, was I was looking at our own grocery bill over the last few years. We who have, abundant gardens and raise a lot of our own food. And I realized that our grocery budget has gone up around $500 a month on average since February 2025 for us farmers. Now, we have not started eating more. Our kids are not quite that big yet. At some point we will probably, our budget will go up just because they're teenagers. And we have not started buying more expensive food. In fact, we probably eat what would be traditionally less expensive food now than we used to because the bills have gone up so much. In general, even as farmers, we've always spent a fair amount on other foods because we buy a lot of organic products that we don't grow, like rice, wheat, pastas, etc. And we like to support some of the livestock farmers around us for, our meat consumption and egg consumption. Food, and specifically food from responsible local growers, is important to our family and in general to the world. So it's a fair chunk of our budget, but $500 a month in a single year is bananas. And it's not yet because of the war. This jump started about a year ago in March and April of 2025 and has not really relented since. Why then? Well, you will remember tariffs, is kind of where it all started. That was the one thing that drove the food prices up significantly, among other products, like basically all of them. You will remember that the avian influenza happened too. That was a good time. So there was that effect on the egg production and also chicken. Inflation doesn't help. Farm labor shortages don't help. And then now you can throw in gas prices and the fact that once, those prices rise on things like groceries, they hardly or rarely come down very much. And it has become increasingly difficult to just afford reasonably healthy food in America, especially when you throw in the jump in health insurance costs, among other affordability issues. And I'm a farmer saying this who grows a lot of his own food. I think we are certainly at an interesting inflection point where even the people who produce the food are having trouble keeping up with the food costs, and that can't be sustainable. I don't have a policy answer here, but food costs have to come down. And if someone who can already produce a large chunk of their own food is saying that, it's definitely not great for people who can't grow their own food or don't grow their own food and who can't afford another $5,000 to $6,000 a year thrown into their food budgets. Especially, let's just add another one with cuts in SNAP benefits. Anyway, I'm glad we keep a detailed enough budget to be able to see how much more it has increased, but I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't need a budget to tell them that. Their rumbling stomachs are probably pretty clear. Farmers can help by bringing food to food banks, offering pay what you can models or pay what you can days at their farm stores, or maybe pay what you can hours at the farmer's market, sliding scale CSAs, but the dent that can make is only so large. I have ideas for solutions, community-based solutions, but I'd be curious to hear what you all have to say about this. How are your grocery bills? How have they been? Have you been able to change or lower your grocery bills by raising some of your own food? Let me know, and we'll chat about it on Friday. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break and then talk about starting a new farm. How convenient. BRB.
Okay, so 10 days after the potato frost, looks like it's like they're recovering. You can see the new growth right there in the middle. They still look pretty rough, but they're coming back.
Today's episode is brought to you by GrownBy. Grow smarter with GrownBy, the farmer-owned cooperative. GrownBy is the platform for online sales of everything, custom and traditional CSAs, halves of beef, flower bouquets, wholesale to restaurants, and now GrownBy supports in-person sales too. Their new app, GrownBy Register, you can supercharge your market and farm stand, finally bringing together your online and offline sales and customer data. GrownBy is proud to make local food accessible by processing SNAP benefits online and in person right within the app. GrownBy helps you put your best food forward. Schedule a demo at coop.grownby.com/no-till. That's coop.grownby.com/no-till. All right, back to the show. A quick and loving reminder that if you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Alcart, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse, really loving your show. I am thinking of starting a 1 to 1.5 acre flower farm to help my retirement savings. Could be swayed to market garden, have clay soil, not ideal drainage. Everything is meadow grass right now. Do you think growing a field of alfalfa the first season might be a good way to break up my clay soil? As a first step, do you think I would be better off tilling initially before I sell my tractor, or should I get some silage tarps? I feel like an acre's worth of cardboard is a lot to keep in place. What would you recommend to a single person who has not taken her first farming steps yet?" End quote. All right, fun question here. Thank you. So first I should say, I don't know that I would start a farm to help with retirement, at least not if I already had a good retirement. And I should say that from the start because farms are expensive, and unless you are really willing to be able to make it as successful, like a fully successful business, and really, really invest in that, it can be hard to turn into a retirement, or it can take many, many years. Though, of course, if you turn a piece of property into a farm with housing and infrastructure that can be sold at a profit at a later date, that could be used as retirement, I suppose. Not my favorite thing to do that because it runs up the price of farmland for everyone else, and it makes it less accessible to newer growers, but it's certainly better than turning it into condos, I suppose. Anyway, just be thoughtful about it is all I'm saying here. Farms are businesses, expensive ones, and must be treated as such. All right, now with that caveat out of the way, turning over an acre or so of clay and trying to make it functional can be tough. I might start much, much smaller than that, but if that's the size that you're after, the first thing I would do for rough soil is to get as much good compost as you can and then plow that into the gardens, especially if they are low in organic matter / nutrients plus compacted. If they are not, if the soil tests, tell you they have decent organic matter and nutrient content, then you could go with tarping and then covering the now tarped gardens with deep compost beds. And yes, an acre of cardboard, if it's not under compost, will absolutely blow away, 100%. Don't do that. That would be a waste of labor and cardboard. Cardboard needs something to lock it in place, like compost. When I would do that, I would put some cardboard down, layer a little bit of compost just to lock it in place, and then I would put my layers of compost over top of that. I should also say, start with the marketing plan. Again, an acre or an acre and a half is of basically any crop is going to be too much even for the experienced grower on their own, but a good marketing plan will help you to determine how much you need of what. Start very small if you can, like you can plow the whole thing if you want to and then get plots ready and cover crops and ready to expand into, but don't try to start a full acre on your own for your first go at this. Start with a quarter of an acre, maybe less. Pick flowers or veggies, whichever sounds more interesting to you. I mean, flowers tend to be more profitable, but they are also a little bit more complicated. Though feel free to mix it up and get a little experience with each in your first year or so. Take your time here and really develop a good business plan for the farm so it doesn't just eat all of your savings and energy instead of adding to them. Don't sell the tractor, at least not right away. Really get a feel for the work and the complexity of it. You can do it for sure, but just a gentle reminder that farming can be really tough and really expensive. And if you can take a year or so to get the gardens and farm set up before, ever relying on produce or flowers for income, even better. So anyway, let us know what questions come up for you as you begin this journey, and listeners, feel free to kindly add your 2 cents. Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break. When we return, perhaps a good starter seeder for that new farm. Got a good little flow to the topics today, but I'll let you be the judge of that. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by BCS America. If you're practicing no-till or low-till farming, you know that heavy equipment is often the enemy of your soil structure. That's where BCS two-wheeled tractors come in. Built for small farms, market gardens, and regenerative growers, BCS tractors give you the power to manage beds efficiently without unnecessary compaction. For the low and no-till grower, there are 2 attachments that change the game. The BCS Power Harrow stirs only the top inch or 2 of soil to incorporate soil amendments and create a perfect seed bed without soil inversion or pulling up weed seeds. And when it's time to terminate cover crops, that flail mower shreds organic matter into a beautiful, nutrient-rich mulch right on top of the bed. To find your local dealer and see the full lineup of attachments designed for the way you farm, head to bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Agriculture. If the season is picking up and the pile of receipts is starting to grow, you're not alone. Good Agriculture handles farm bookkeeping so you can stay ahead of the mess before it piles up. They keep your books organized each month, help you understand what's coming in and what's going out, and show you where your farm stands so you can make better business decisions throughout the season. If you're behind, they'll help get everything caught up. They also help farmers find funding and stay ahead of grant deadlines. You run the farm, they help the business. Learn more at goodagriculture.com/info. That's goodagriculture.com/info. All right, back to the show. All right, so let's do a total Earthway seeder breakdown, because especially right now where some of you may be learning hard lessons about trying to seed things by hand, or conversely might be asking yourselves if you should level up from the Earthway, then let's talk about it. First, the Earthway seeder is still probably the most bang for the buck seeder on the market, maybe the most bang for the buck tool on the farm in general. At around $150, you get a very basic seeder that will last you pretty much the rest of your farming career, with the need to change the belt probably every few years or so. On the pros side, beyond price, you have a lightweight seeder that, with the right plates, can seed everything from tiny arugula seeds to jumbo pea seeds. There are fertilizing attachments as well, and we've used it for years to inject dry alfalfa meal using that jumbo seed plate, not the fertilizer attachment, for crops like tomatoes and peppers. And yeah, we'll literally just pour like alfalfa meal in a mix in there, and then we'll just drill that into the sides of the bed. I really love the Earthway for cover cropping too. I would say that this is where it probably gets the most use on our farm, is for seeding cover crops, especially rye and vetch and those sorts of things, which the beet plate does a great job of, notably. But the other day, I actually, in fact, sowed our milpa popcorn with the Earthway seeder, so it still does some crops for us. Another pro is how adjustable it is for seed depth. Unlike the Jang, where you need a wrench to, change the depth, which boo on that, the Earthway can be done by hand. Now, on the con side, the hopper can get clogged if it's filled a little bit too high. Also, any pelleted seeds can get caught and crushed relatively easily. So if pelleted seeds are your thing, the Jang is a better investment for seeders. Also, jumping spiders love the chute that enables the seeds to fall into the furrow it creates. That's always fun. So you end up with this like nice buildup of seeds, and you don't realize for a little while that you've been seeding. Obviously, it's happened to me a few times. So anyway, the chute needs to be cleaned before every usage. I usually stuff just a little bit of excess string trimmer string in there. That does the trick. Another issue can be density with the Earthway. It plants very densely. You may have to tape over some of the holes to keep it from getting too dense in the rows, especially with things like beets and carrots. Also, the soil tilth must be pretty good to use it. If it's too rough or chunky, the Earthway can have a tougher time than something like the Jang, which kind of can go through some rougher soils. For me, though, this is a no-brainer seeder. Like I have said before, I know many pro growers who still rely heavily on the Earthway, if not exclusively on this seeder, over more expensive options like the Jang. You may occasionally have to make some adjustments, but the Earthway is a really simple and affordable solution to seeding. Anyway, as always, feel free to chime in on your Earthway thoughts, and would love to hear what your experiences have been. Otherwise, I think that is a wrap on this Till Tuesday. Don't forget, No Till Growers is a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and really, really, really greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That is an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. The summer is often when we have our hardest time getting sponsors, but also when we have the most listeners. So just keep that in mind if you have something you want to advertise. Big thank you to Michelle. Big thank you to No Till Growers Board of Directors for their help. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for absolutely everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for giving me a break every show so I can take a sip of tea, and for the music, of course. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the month of May, you get a shout on the show. So no new signups again yesterday. All good with groceries and gas prices going up so much. I'm actually honored with every single signup that you all do. You all are amazing. Thank you so much for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow for live. We're going live tomorrow. We'll see you live tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. That'll be fun.